So we'll go ahead and get started with today's AGU AGI Heads and Chairs webinar. So quick introductions. Pranoti Asher, who's Assistant Director of Grants and Education Programs at AGU, and Eva Kostyu, Program Manager of the AGU Bridge Program, are here online with us. I'm Christopher Keene with the American Geosciences Institute. My colleague Leila Gonzalez is here as well, helping host today's meeting. So today's webinar is Geology Licensure and its role in student preparation and program assessment. And it's my pleasure to introduce Randy Kath, who's Senior Geologist of Petrologic Solutions and the ASBOG Academic Assessment Coordinator, and Jack Warner, who's a psychometrician and has been working with ASBOG for many, many years related to their exams. And so with that, I think we're going to hand it over to you, Randy.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Well, good morning, participants on the West Coast, and good afternoon to participants on the East Coast. I'd like to thank AGI and AGU for hosting this Heads and Chairs webinar. And more importantly, I'd like to thank all of the online participants for taking time out of your important schedules to attend the webinar. As Chris said, my name's Randy Kath. I'm a professor of geology at the University of West Georgia, and I've been involved with test development with ASBOG. Let's see if I can get this. There we go. Sorry. I've been involved with test development with ASBOG since 2007. As president of ASBOG in 2015, and I'm currently the academic assessment coordinator. Jack Warner and I will be your presenters today. Jack, would you like to introduce yourself?
It's my pleasure to be here today talking about the task analysis for geology, and look forward to visiting with you in just a few minutes. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Jack. So during our presentation, Jack and I are going to be providing an overview of how ASBOG determines the scope and contents of the licensure exams, in addition to the tools that ASBOG has developed and demographic data that we've collected over the years that can be used by geoscience programs to better align educational curricula with geologic skills needed in the professional workforce. And that's very important now. And next slide, please. So the National Association of State Boards of Geology, also known as ASBOG, I'm going to go back, sorry, is a not-for-profit organization, and we serve as a connective link between the different state licensing boards. So you can think of ASBOG, we basically function as a professional society for the state licensing boards, and we're probably best known for identifying subject matter experts who volunteer their time to attend workshops where we score the exams, review exams, and define the scope and content of the exams. However, there's a general misconception among students and faculty regarding geologic licensure in states and ASBOG. Each state has its own licensing rule, and those states, just like getting a driver's license, it's state specific, and you have to meet the state rules and requirements to receive a license. ASBOG does not issue a license. We only provide the examinations for the Fundamental of Geology's exam, the FG, and the Practice of Geology exam, the PG, to our member boards. So to receive a license, there are kind of three components that you have to satisfy before you apply for a license. You have to do the examinations, the FG and PG. You need the education, usually a BS in geology, engineering geology, geological engineering, and work experience. So those are kind of the three prongs of the trident, as we say. In addition to providing licensure exams, ASBOG also conducts outreach through various geoscience organizations, in particular educating students on the process to achieve professional geology licensure. We also have developed and maintain a FG prep course to help prepare students to take the fundamentals of geology. So probably what most people are aware of are the exams. The ASBOG licensure exams, we provide these twice a year in the spring and in the fall. Usually there's 2 days that the exams are administered, Thursday and Friday typically, and 4 periods, Thursday 8 to 12 and 1 to 5, and Friday 8 to 12, 1 to 5. The exams are in a multiple choice format. There's each candidate is allowed 4 hours to complete the exams. As shown on the slide here, the Fundamentals of Geology has 140 questions, whereas the Practice of Geology, the PG, has 110 questions. Both of these exams are administered through a CBT computer-based format throughout the US, Canada, Puerto Rico by our vendor Prometric. So currently, there are 31 states that regulate the practice of the profession, shown in blue here, plus Puerto Rico, a US territory. Colorado and Alaska have statutory requirements for geologists, and 6 states, shown in yellow there, have certification. So there's only 11 states in the US that don't regulate the practice of the profession. And because of that, I think it's very important that we educate our students on the importance of licensure and licensure mobility. And on this next slide, we can look at the United States here. So these green states, as we call them, they have statutory requirements and they regulate the practice of the profession. So if you're conducting public practice of the profession in a green state, you must have a license, otherwise you can get in trouble. And a lot of times we have students who come to the GSA, when we're at GSA, they come to our booth and they say, well, you know, look at that gray state, Colorado. So I'm going to work in Colorado. Do I need a license? And we respond by saying, if you work for a company based in Colorado, you're probably going to work on projects in, say, Wyoming or Utah. Both of those states are regulated, so you would need a license. Okay. And okay, Jack, I probably went a touch too long, but Jack will be presenting the results of our latest task analysis survey. So take it away, Jack.
Thanks, Randy. Appreciate it. It's my pleasure to be visiting with you today about the task analysis survey that was completed this last year. And first of all, the purpose of the task analysis is to maximize the relevance of the examinations to the practice of the geologic profession. The 2023 task analysis survey represents the 6th time this particular type of study has been conducted for this organization. The most recent study is the study that I'm going to be talking about today. The results were implemented in early 2023. Currently, there are 32 member boards, members of ASBOG, who sent email invitations to candidates, to licensees throughout the country. Just under 5,000 licensees completed the online survey. The survey was also sent out by AGI, email invitations to academicians, and we had just over 300 return or complete the online survey. Now, the task analysis survey is based on 43 task statements, and they're distributed across 8 content domains. The judgment of importance, this is the rating scale. This is the rating scale used by not only practicing geologists, but academicians as well, to rate each of the 43 tasks. Based on your knowledge and experience as a professional geologist, geoscientist, rate how important each task is to the practice of geology as it is applied to the protection of the public health, safety, and welfare using the scale below. Note that this rating scale goes from 0 up to 3. I think that's important to kind of ground yourself on that rating scale, because we're going to be looking at ratings based on this rating scale, mean values coming up. So with that in mind, let's just look at how many surveys were completed and in which one jurisdiction these geologists were actually conducting most of their geologic activities. Even though we have only 32 member boards, when asked the question, in which one jurisdiction do you perform most of your geologic activities, all 50 states are represented in the data set. Similarly, with academia, all 50 jurisdictions are represented in the database. As far as the primary area of practice, notice that the highest percentage of respondents indicated environmental geology as their primary area of practice, hydrogeology 23%. relative to academia, a much more even distribution across the primary areas of practice relative to practicing geologists. Now we're going to look at the mean values for all task statements for practicing geologists, and this is where that rating scale that I pointed to earlier comes into play. Notice on the ordinate, we range all the way at the bottom left, 0 all the way up to 3. So if all respondents indicated 3 on a particular task, that particular task would have a mean value of 3. On this particular survey, task 1, plan and conduct geological investigations, that received the highest average rating, a mean of 2.75, while task 15, identify and interpret fossils and fossil assemblages, received the lowest average rating. The mean value there, 1.22. But we do see an extreme variation in the mean values across the 43 task statements. Figure 6, this shows the relationships between the responses from practicing geologists in each state and each member board with the entire nation. The high positive item total correlations indicate the practice of the profession in each jurisdiction is very similar to the practice nationwide. Cronbach's alpha coefficient is used to measure the consistency of responses among jurisdictions, 0 indicating no consistency, 1 indicating perfect consistency, and in this particular study, the coefficient equals 0.997. So what this shows is that these instruments will be relevant to candidates who practice in any of the jurisdictions currently that are members of ASBOG. Figure 7, what we're looking at here are the mean values for all task statements for practicing geologists across time. Now, the changes that were made to the task statements since 2010 have been primarily editorial in nature, which makes it possible to evaluate the results from the 2023 task analysis, compare them with the earlier studies. And what we find is a remarkable degree of similarities with the 2 earlier studies. The correlation between 2023 and 2015, 0.98, 2023 going back to 2010, 0.97, finally the 2015 to the 2010, 0.98. So again, a high degree of consistency in the practice across time. I might note that the 2010 and the 2015 surveys were male surveys, just over 2,000, somewhere between 2,000, 2,500 respondents, and we had roughly twice as many with the online survey complete the format. What we're looking at here would be the mean values for academia across the 3 time periods. Now, while the correlations are not as high as those for practicing geologists, they are nonetheless quite high, which is really comforting to know that we have consistency across time, not only for practicing geologists, but also for academia as well. And if we look at figure 9, this shows the relationship between practicing geologists and academia. The correlation between the 2 groups you can see is 0.87, which indicates that practicing geologists and academia view the profession similarly. Regarding minor differences, academicians rated tasks higher in 4 domains. The 2nd through the 5th domain that you see on the chart here, namely mineralogy, now that's the 2nd domain from the left, sedimentology, 3rd domain, geomorphology, 4th domain, and finally structure, the 5th domain. Figure 10 shows the average rating for individuals licensed 10 or fewer years compared to those licensed 11 or more years. Length of licensure has virtually no influence on the ratings made by licensees. Similarly, the number of years practicing geology does not impact ratings. 10 or fewer years practicing versus 11 or more years practicing, correlation 0.99. What is your highest degree in the geologic sciences? BA, BS degree in red, the advanced degrees, the master's and the doctorate in dark blue. Those lines lie pretty much on top of one another. This is the only bivariate correlation I've ever actually calculated in my entire life, where the correlation is actually 0.996. It rounds to 1, but we report it as 0.99 because we realize that all measurement contains some degree of error. Finally, we're looking at the test blueprint for the fundamentals examination. Now, the task means the average values serve as weights, with more items assigned to those tasks with higher mean values. And a subtlety here, but an important subtlety, the test blueprint for the fundamentals is based on an average between the ratings made by academicians and practicing geologists. We're looking now at the practice of geology blueprint, the domain percentages. The working domains you can see have higher percentages than they do relative to the fundamentals examination. Unlike the fundamentals exam, however, the practice of geology examination is based exclusively on the ratings made by practicing geologists. Now, my presentation is focused on the tasks performed by geologists, and Randy is now going to give focus on the knowledge base that is necessary in order to perform these tasks. Leela, you can now turn the presentation back to Randy. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Jack. Excellent presentation on the tasks and how it defines the scope and content of the exams. I think anyone who's online today and sees those graphs and how statistically close each one of those curves are would say that the practice of the profession hasn't changed a lot, at least in the last 3 years or three test studies. However, in the past, when environmental and hydro had peaked up around 2000, 2005, we saw a big change in some of those domains. So as Jack was pointing out in his graphs, there are these 43 task statements that were on the bottom of x-axis there, bottom of the graph. And in the past, ASBOG, we've been approached by a lot of universities saying, how can we better align our course curriculum with the practice of the profession? And what we responded in the past is align your course content with these task statements. And that sounds really good, but unfortunately, we tried it and we realized, yeah, it's virtually impossible to make that alignment with task statements. So in 2023, ASBOG And during this exercise, we realized that the format and content of our existing knowledge base was kind of inadequate and difficult for candidates to use to prepare for the exams or universities to align their curriculum. So we started developing these new knowledge bases for each one of the 8 content domains. And we really wanted the knowledge base to look a lot like a university course syllabus. And so last year, we published the knowledge base statements on ASBOG's website, and these new knowledge bases are based on the task analysis survey. So these are the 8 content domains that Jack showed at the bottom of each one of his slides there. And Jack pointed out, I think, on the practice of geology, that hydroengineering and mineral and energy resources, those are kind of the working domains. So on the PG exams, those get more questions on them. But what we'll do is in the next couple slides, I'll show you 3 of the knowledge bases. No particular reason. I picked structural geology because I teach structural geology, so I thought that would be a good one. But then on this slide, and I think these slides will be posted on the website, there's a link there to ASBOG's website where you can access the new knowledge base statements. And so if you don't have that link, just go to ASBOG's website, and on the left-hand panel, you'll see study material, and it's under that link there. Okay. So this first one here, this is the knowledge base that we have for structural geology. And really based on what academia and practicing geologists, how they responded to the task, these are the important concepts that students need to complete and be exposed to pass the ASBOG exams. And because this is what's happening in the practice of the profession. This next slide here, this is one for hydrogeology. And I know you don't have time to read all these, but you'll be able to go back and look at these. But these are really important concepts that students need. And if they understand these concepts, they'll do well on the ASBOG exams, and they'll do very well in the workplace, because this is what practicing geologists say that they're doing. The final slide they'll show you, here's the mineral and energy resources knowledge base. And again, this is what the task is telling us that needs to be taught in the universities, because this is what practicing geologists are doing. And based on AGI's workforce data, about 92% of all geoscience majors go into the workforce. Therefore, it's really important, based on surveying practicing geologists and academicians, that this content be covered in university courses. Now, we're not telling faculty to teach the exams. We would never do that. We just want to make sure that their courses contain applicable material for student success in the workforce. Okay. So the last topic that we'll go through in the webinar today is something called the Curriculum Performance Assessment Tool, and this, or CPAT as we call it. In 2008, we started collecting demographic data from candidates taking both the fundamentals and practice of geology exams. And most importantly, we started capturing year of graduation, the highest degree that they got, the AGI institutional code where they got their degrees, and whether a candidate was a senior in their geoscience program. And what we're seeing more and more is that based on different statutes, as a graduating senior, you can take the exam in many cases. So using this data, ASBOG can generate statistical information to evaluate your student's performance on the FG exam. And this student performance can be directly related back to the education that they received. So we'd like to answer the question, did their education prepare them for the workforce? So thus, this data set can really provide a nice objective assessment based on a national data set, which is based on the task analysis survey. So I showed this slide. Right now, there's 67 universities, which is approximately 12% of all schools awarding a BA/BS degree in geology, that are using CPAT for program assessment and program accreditation. As many university programs go through assessment every 5 years or so, CPAT is a really good objective way to get that information for accrediting agencies. So for instance, at our school, we've got SACS, Southern Association of Colleges and Schools. So if you want your university on the list, I'll come back and tell you how you can get on the list. But one of the things, this is very interesting to me, because this is just the top 12 universities that are by volume taking the exam. And the top 3 there, Western Washington, University of Mississippi, Ole Miss, and West Georgia, they all require that students take the fundamentals of geology exam. This is not an exit exam. It's used for assessment only. And that's a really important thing to note there. So if we look at here, what's the basis of using the fundamentals as an assessment tool? What you can see here in green, the BABS is about 69%, and no degree is about 5.5%. So more than about 70% of all candidates taking the fundamentals are at the BS, BA level or graduating seniors. So we have more than 20,700 records in the national database. So there's a really strong statistical basis to use this as an assessment tool. And additionally, what we find is CPAT's very sensitive to course changes and or faculty changes. And you can ask questions about that at the end if you'd like. Just a quick go through look at CPAT here, a quick screenshot from the database. We select your institution from the AGI code, and we can generate a report. If you want a report for your institution, all you need to do is contact me and request a CPAT report. And best of all, it's free, so everyone should have access to this. So once we're inside CPAT, we select your university. If you can read this, you probably can't, but it says Chimney Rock University. We just made a fictitious university to go through during the webinar today. Okay, so this is the main interface for CPAT here, and we can generate a lot of reports using the aggregate data for your institution. Probably the most statistically useful are z-scores and percentiles if you're a statistician. However, scaled score versus percent correct and primary practice and percent passing by degree year are also very useful. And if you ask for a CPAT report, those are all included in the CPAT report. But then we can dig down a little bit deeper, and we can go into detailed analysis of each specific domain. So we can look at mineralogy, we can look at general, we can look at engineering, geology, and so forth. Okay. So when we get to the domain assessment level, in here we can have different statistical comparisons where your school's aggregate data to the national data set. Several different methods. We usually do the normalized ratio scores in the CPAT report. We can do percent above and below national mean, all sorts of different reports. We can generate the report for first time or multiple time test takers. We can separate seniors from degreed candidates taking the exam. And this is all part of that demographic data that is captured in the preamble when you take the exams. We can also, if you don't like the way we process the data, we can provide you with raw unprocessed data. So again, we just can generate a data report. And that data report, this is just in a PDF format. We can supply it to you in Excel format. And that gives you the opportunity to use whatever method you would like to go through and process the data. Okay. So finally, this is what our university is using, and this is what I'd recommend if you want to integrate the fundamentals as an assessment tool into your program, is that you follow some model like this. So basically, you integrate the fundamentals into a capstone course or a senior course where your graduating seniors are taking this. And what we've done at the University of West Georgia, and we'd recommend, is you add that course, you add the cost of the exam into the course activity fee or lab fee. Get the students just paying for it right up front. And of course, the more students that take the exam, the more statistically significant your results become. And then as you start to receive your CPAT data, look at what's happening with the data sets and make program adjustments as necessary and monitor your program over time and the progress over time. Because what you'll see is when at the University of West Georgia, we weren't teaching economic geology. We put economic back into our program and we went up above the national average in economic. Engineering geology is taught every other year, and every other year we go above the national average and drop below. So it's a very sensitive measure of your different programs that you have. Okay, well, I think that's a good point to stop there. I appreciate your attention, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Randy. That was terrific, and this has definitely generated a lot of questions in the chat. I think so I think we'll go ahead and first try to moderate those out, and then hopefully we can open the floor for a broader conversation. So Yeah, I'll just go through these in order. So, can you further explain what you mean about Colorado having statutory requirements but doesn't actually have licensure?
Yeah, so for Colorado, it is written into the statute in law what it takes to call yourself a professional geologist. It's basically self-regulated. So they do not have a licensing board that regulates it, but there, if you read the statute, there are requirements for you to be able to call yourself a PG.
Okay, that's good. So someone reminiscing about having to drive many states to take the test. So with the advent of the computerized testing, is it making it more accessible in these gray states?
Oh, absolutely. So I think Prometric has a little over 500 testing sites throughout the United States. So it used to be in paper and pencil, you'd have to go to the state that you're getting licensed in. But for instance, you could apply in Georgia, and if you're out working in Texas or Colorado, wherever you're working, you can take the exam there. That score will come back to the geology board in Georgia. And then if you took the practice of geology in, say, Maine and want to get licensed in California, ASBOG would send those fundamentals and practice scores to California for licensure. So once you take those exams, you never lose those scores, and any of the green states will accept those. And yes, you can take the exams in the gray states as long as there's a testing facility that Prometric has.
Okay, that's great. So person has a two-part question. So is the FG exam using this way designed for summative assessment for graduating seniors? Versus, within their normal formative, and do they really actually, how do you get them to take this exam seriously if it's not actually tied right into their degree award?
Yeah, those are great questions. Yeah, getting them to take the exam seriously, they need a little bit of skin in the game. And what we did at the University of West Georgia, what we started to implement, it hasn't been implemented fully, is they pay through their activity fees. And we do not, even though they pay for the exam, they don't have to take the exam. So we end up with a little pool of money at the end. And if we tried to give money back, so if you pass the exam, you got your $200 exam fee back through the university. So that gives them a little skin in the game and makes them want to take it. The fundamentals is kind of the inch deep, mile wide knowledge base that you need. And the best time to take this is right as you're graduating, when all that knowledge is fresh in your mind. You don't want to say, well, I'm going to be in a gray state, I'm not going to take it. And 10 years down the road, you end up in a green state and need to get a license. And you go back to take the fundamentals and practice and can't pass the fundamentals, but you pass the practice exam. You've been out of school too long to pass the fundamentals.
Okay. And person then was also talking about how, for accreditation for their department, they can't use an exit exam for their as program part of their program assessment. What have you seen related to this kind of situation of applying it in the relative to the university accreditation? And has it been an impediment to using the licensing exam, for departments?
Yeah, definitely not an impediment. Most assessment of university programs, especially geoscience programs, is they write their own assessment tests. And for courses, they'll say, well, take this test before you take the course, and then I'm going to give you the same test after. Oh, they learned something. That was a great assessment. Using a national data set gives you a very objective assessment. And it's based on what practicing geologists are doing, not 100% based on what academicians are doing, because 92% are going into the workforce, only a small percent are going into the academia, especially tenure track positions. And I would recommend never call it an exit exam, because to me, that means you have to pass that exam to get a degree from your program. Call it a program assessment exam. I think that that's very palatable with most administrations.
Okay. Is the CPAT accessible to the licensing agencies? This person in particular was wondering about the Texas Board of Professional Geologists. And
Yeah.
in such a way that they could assess individual college and university performance.
Yeah. So we do give it to licensing boards. They actually have the data. Now, they may not have it in a format that they can get what they want, but all the exam data goes to every one of the boards. So they have that data. We will provide it to the licensing boards and universities for free. We will not provide it. So if, I'm just going to, since you said Texas, say Texas A&M wants their data, we'll give them a CPAT report. But if they want UT Austin's data, we will not give them that data. So we don't want one program trying to compare themselves to another program.
And so how does the department get access to their data? Maybe they're not formally coordinating their students taking the exam, but if you may straggle in and do it. So how does that all work?
Yeah, the best thing to do is email me. I've got several emails, but RLCath, so for Randy Lee Cath, rlcath@comcast.net. And then kind of our criteria to be statistically significant, you need at least 10 exams in the database. So if your university has at least 10 people have taken the exam and it's in the database, we can provide you with CPAT data. 10's pretty lean. I'd like to see that number about 20, but we will provide it at 10. But I think once you start seeing these data sets and start looking at it, you're going to want to encourage your students to take the exam so you get more data, right? And the more data you have, the more statistically significant these CPAT reports are.
Yeah. That's good. And so sort of back to the students, whether it's in your experience there in Georgia or what you hear from other departments, do the students push back when they're required to take the exam, and what are the motivations for that pushback that you find?
Well, we've integrated the exam into our economic geology, which is our capstone course, for about 12 years. And over the 12 years that I've been teaching that with the capstone course, I've only had one student pushback. All the other students, they just think it's a requirement of the course, even though we tell them they don't have to do this, but they want to do it because it really starts their profession. If they pass this exam, many of them go on to graduate school, and their colleagues in graduate school are amazed that they've already gotten their GIT, their geologists in training, that they passed the fundamentals exam. So I think that's a good incentive for them to put on their resumes is that they're GIT and they're working towards their profession. So they have a little equity in their profession.
Okay, that's good. Another question, and this goes, I think, back to your data. So I see a lot of environmental scientists filling the roles of geologists, even though they have not had the entire geology curriculum. They do get some of these geology jobs. Do you have any information regarding how environmental scientists or students with environmental degrees are doing on the FG exam?
We do a little bit. One of the reports that we can generate, and Jack could even expound on this a little more, but we do ask them what they perceive their practice is. Do they think they're environmental geology, structural geology, mineralogist, or so forth? So we can parse that data out. But most students who are getting a pure environmental science degree, typically those are not licensure qualifying programs. And when they go to the state licensing board, they're not going to get a license. So many of them are not taking the fundamentals of geology exam because many licensing boards, it's very strict that you have to have a degree in geology, engineering geology, geological engineering, or have 30 semester hours, 24 upper division towards a degree in geology. So if they don't have the right coursework, most of the licensing boards won't give them a license.
Okay, that's good. Still more questions coming in there, Randy.
Uh-oh, Jack, you got to take some of these.
So I think this is a good segue for some of the things that ASBOG's been involved in. Are there some more recent practice exams? A person indicated took years to locate a 2012 set of quizzes that were based off of it. So can you talk about available practice exams and the training course and things like that?
Yeah, so probably for the students that are online, any candidates, if you already graduated and are taking planning on taking the exams, if you go to our website, there's a candidate handbook. It was updated in 2024, July 2024, and that pretty much has everything you need to know about preparing for and taking the exams. And there's some practice questions in there as well for both the fundamentals of geology and practice of geology. And as we stated earlier, that ASBOG did prepare and maintains a FG prep course. And that FG prep course, it's about an 8-hour course. Each one of the modules is about an hour long for the 8 content domains. And at the end of each one of those modules, there's a self-test that you take. And then after you finish the self-test, there's another video that actually the professor who did that and all the FG prep course personnel, if you will, are all PhD, PG credentialed. And so at the end of those, you can go through and listen to why the correct answer was correct and why the 3 distractors were incorrect. So those are pretty good. And we have been changing out some of the questions in the candidate handbook. Some of them we've recognized are getting a little stale, and we should be doing an update to that handbook in the next month or 2 and getting all the knowledge base in there as well.
Okay. And one of the folks wants to know, what's the cost of the FG prep course?
The FG prep course is $350, and you have access for 6 months. For some reason, if you take and don't pass the exam, we give you access for another 6 months. And I can say statistically that of course, we capture that data as well as the demographic data. And what we're seeing right now is candidates who take the ASBOG FG prep course perform better on the exams than any of the other prep courses, and better than the people who don't take the prep course. So we're pretty pleased about that.
Okay. And so I think this is an excellent question. So how does the fundamentals or the PG exam include addressing tools, skills, things like GIS, computational methods, modeling, et cetera, largely because our professional alumni are coming back and saying these skills are just as wanted in new hires as the content knowledge?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. And on the fundamentals, there are a lot of GIS questions on there that are basic GIS, not computational modeling and things of that nature. Kind of be outside the real scope of someone with a BS degree. But there are GIS type questions in there. The practice of the geology is a different style exam in that it's a lot more calculations and computations related to geology. So that's where we would have more of that style of question.
Yeah. And I know you sort of touched on, but could you go into a bit more detail about exactly how are the questions themselves on the exams created, and how much of the input on those are from people who hired geologists?
Well, that's a good question. So the exam questions aren't generated by a bunch of faculty sitting in the back room saying, "Oh, they'll never get this answer." There's a very rigorous process that Jack follows us through, and it's all based on psychometric standards. And so basically, we have people who will write the stem of the question and write the key and the 3 distractors, sorry, and then they must document with references why the key is correct and the distractors are incorrect. Once the author gets that, then it goes to another subject matter expert who goes through and reviews all that, checks it all, makes sure it's a valid question. So then it goes to another subject matter expert and a third subject matter expert, and then it comes back to the primary author to make sure, one, they haven't changed the question. And then once it's an approved question where it has 3 reviews plus the primary author, It goes over to Jack, it gets integrated into the item bank, and then it gets run as a new question on the exam, so we can start gathering statistics on those questions.
Okay.
Did that hit it, Jack? Anything I missed?
No, Randy, you did a fine job. I'm really proud of you.
Oh.
Yeah, nice job.
Okay, so one more came in. Okay, so another question that literally just came in. When a student takes the exam and already holds let's say a master's or bachelor's from a different university, who gets credit for the test score on the CPAT, or are both the MS and BS schools reported to?
Yeah, very good question. And what we've done is there's no way to separate those. You don't know if the knowledge base that the student got was at the BS level or MS level. So what we pretty much do is we restrict CPAT to BS only, because then it is a good program assessment of your BS program. But once you start getting advanced degrees, master's, PhDs, it's hard to separate where the knowledge came from.
Okay. Okay, so another one. Let's see. So just someone suggesting, answering a few questions at the end of the study guide isn't really the same as sitting down and taking a 4-hour practice exam, like you can on the practice SATs and GREs. So just suggesting having access to more full-length practice exams or copies of previous ASBOG exams would be really helpful as part of that prep for the exam. I guess, can you talk about sort of that longer term exam security and your question management over a longer arc? I know that that's part of the issue.
Well, first of all, the exams are the intellectual property of ASBOG, and no previous exam would ever be released, at least not on purpose. So we wouldn't release an old exam, because then those questions would have to be removed from the item bank and never used again. There are a lot of study guides out there, Momentix and Reg Review, that have much longer exams in them. And then if you go to our website on the left panel under candidate resources and click on study material, there are other resources in there like USGS WRI 2220. And although there aren't exam questions in there, there's really good review material. And what I'd recommend for anyone who's trying to study for the exam is the AGI data sheets are fantastic. It's like a Reader's Digest of all the 8 content domains plus more in there. So that's a great resource. And pick up a physical geology textbook and read it cover to cover. That's great for taking and passing the fundamentals of geology exam.
Okay. And where could someone find out what the 43 tasks actually are?
Those are on the website. If you go to asbog.org, and on the left-hand side, scroll down, you'll see the summary report that Jack presented for the 2023 tasks. And it's in there. And also on the left-hand panel under candidate resources, you'll see exam blueprint. And for the exam blueprint, you'll see the 43 task statements, as well as the pie charts that Jack showed that shows the content of each one of the exams.
Okay.
But I think the knowledge base is a little more important, especially if you're trying to align a curriculum with the practice of the profession.
So anyone have any additional questions for Randy and Jack, either in the chat box or if you want to raise your hands like that, knock yourself out? Been a really good set of questions, Randy and Jack. So definitely was thought provoking.
Oh, good.
Okay, so I think I think you have definitely filled everyone's brain for the day.
Okay.
So appreciate it. And with that, I'll turn over to Pranoti on the wrap up.
Yeah, thank you very much. This was very, very informative, and obviously you could see from the engagement from the audience, and I hope there are no other questions coming up now. So again, many of you have asked this, will you get access to the slides as well as the recording? Of course, if you registered for this, you'll get that email giving you a link to the recording, and also I put the link to the website where you will be able to find the slides. If you are a department chair and you'd like to be part of the AGU Heads and Chairs community, please feel free to contact me. I would love to add you to the group. And we also have an in-person workshop at just prior to the AGU meeting. So we can also have you participate in that if you're interested. Leela, if you could go to the last slide, please. We have another webinar next month, not next semester. We're going to be talking about graduate student perspectives on the importance and difficulty of finding a research group. So if you are teaching at the graduate level or even at the undergraduate level, I think you'll find some amazing sort of take-home points from this webinar. It'll be on the 7th of March at 1 o'clock. And if you want to catch up on any webinars from last year, or you want to register for all the upcoming webinars, you can certainly go to this website. So thank you very much for your attention and hope you have a great weekend. Thanks, everyone.